I never thought a garage could feel like a battlefield. But that night, as I pulled into my driveway, my stomach dropped like a rock. There she was, Karen from the HOA, sitting in my garage as if it were her living room. My own garage, my space, my sanctuary. And there she was, smirking, her perfectly manicured nails tapping on the steering wheel, completely unbothered that she had parked where she had no right to. I froze for a moment, unsure if my eyes were playing tricks on me. But no, my old sedan was boxed out, wedged tightly behind her SUV. There was no way I could get in. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the sudden rush of heat rising to my face. This wasn't just about parking. This was about boundaries, respect, and the fact that someone could just waltz into my life and act like nothing mattered. Karen noticed me standing there and gave me that smile, the one that made my blood boil every time I saw it. The smug kind, like she was entitled to the world and everyone in it. "Oh, hey, didn't see you there," she said casually, leaning back in her seat. "Just needed to grab something. Hope it's not a problem." Not a problem. My voice wanted to explode, but I forced it down. "Karen, this is my garage. You can't just park here without asking," I said, keeping my tone measured but firm. She laughed, that high-pitched, irritating laugh that made me grit my teeth. "Oh, come on. It's just a garage. Don't be so dramatic. It's not like it's the end of the world." That was it. That casual dismissal lit a fire inside me. She didn't see the violation. She didn't see the anger building in me. To her, my garage was public property, or at least she acted like it was. My heart pounded and my hands clenched into fists. I wanted to shove her out, slam the door, and make her feel just a fraction of the frustration I felt. But I did. Instead, I took a step back and looked around the driveway. My neighborhood was quiet, suburban perfection, manicured lawns, neat flower beds, streetlights glowing softly in the dusk. Everyone's houses were painted in neutral tones, their garages immaculate. But that picture-perfect image hid tension I'd learned to recognize. Karen wasn't just any neighbor, she was HOA chairwoman, the kind of person who thrived on control, on bending rules for her own benefit while policing everyone else. And now she had crossed the line. I tried reasoning with her, though I already knew it wouldn't work. "Karen, I need you to move your car. I can't get in." She stretched lazily, resting one arm on the car door and giving me a look that said she didn't care. I said, "It's fine. Don't worry about it. Besides, you'll get over it." Get over it. I felt my jaw tighten. Every fiber of me screamed against that word. You don't just get over someone invading your home, ignoring your rules, and treating your property like it belongs to them. But I forced a polite nod because escalation wasn't what I wanted, at least not yet. Instead, I decided to retreat, to figure out my options. I went inside and paced, my mind spinning. I called the HOA office, hoping for some intervention. "Hi, this is, I need help. My neighbor Karen parked in my garage without permission. Can someone—" I was cut off by the receptionist's bored voice. "We'll look into it. Please submit a complaint form online. Thank you." Click. That was it. No outrage, no immediate action, no empathy. I sat down on my couch, staring at the wall, feeling a mix of helplessness and rage. I realized then that no one was going to solve this for me. Karen was in my space, mocking my rules, and the HOA wasn't going to lift a finger. It was up to me. As I stared at the garage door from the window, I began to notice small details I had ignored before. The way her SUV was centered, perfectly blocking my car. The faint scent of her expensive perfume lingering in the air. The way she hummed softly, like she owned not just the garage, but my calm, my day, my life. The audacity of it all made my chest tighten. I knew I couldn't just sit there. Something had to change. But what? I didn't want a confrontation in front of neighbors or a scene that would make me the bad guy. I didn't want to stoop to petty arguments. Yet I couldn't let this slide. My mind raced through possibilities: calling a tow truck, filing a formal complaint, getting the police involved. Each option felt extreme, but none of them seemed fast enough then. As the sun dipped lower behind the houses and the evening shadows stretched across the driveway, a thought struck me, a plan, simple yet daring. I could reclaim my space without yelling, without a fight, without losing control. I could make Karen realize she wasn't untouchable. And I could do it in a way that no one would expect. I didn't know exactly how yet. But one thing was clear. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. And for the first time that evening, a small, wicked smile tugged at the corner of my lips. Karen had crossed the line. And now it was my turn to decide what came next. The next morning, I woke up with a strange mix of excitement and anxiety. I couldn't stop thinking about Karen parked in my garage like it was hers. My mind kept replaying the previous evening, the smirk, the humming, the casual dismissal of my feelings. I knew I couldn't let it slide, yet I also didn't want to react impulsively. There had to be a way to handle this that gave me control, not just a fleeting satisfaction. I made my coffee and sat by the window, staring at the garage. Karen's SUV was still there, and I could see her inside, scrolling on her phone as if nothing was wrong. My stomach knotted. Every second she stayed in that space felt like a personal invasion. I felt violated, powerless, and most of all angry. This wasn't just about a car. It was about respect, about boundaries, about someone thinking they could take what wasn't theirs. I tried reasoning with myself, imagining I was overreacting. "It's just a car," I muttered under my breath. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just about the vehicle. It was about the principle. It was about feeling safe in my own home, about having the freedom to enjoy my life without someone barging in and dismissing my existence. By mid-morning, I knew talking to her again wouldn't help. Karen wasn't listening. The HOA hadn't called back. My options were limited. I felt a surge of frustration so sharp it left me momentarily breathless. That's when I decided to take action, but carefully. I couldn't just storm out and yell. I had to be strategic, calculated, precise. I started by observing her routine. She moved slowly, casually, as if she owned every second of my driveway. She left her SUV running for a few minutes, hummed the same tune, and took her time going through her bag. It was infuriating, but it gave me an insight. She was predictable, and predictability could be used against her. By noon, I had drafted a plan in my mind. It was simple but effective. If she couldn't be reasoned with, if the HOA wouldn't intervene, then I would reclaim my space in a way that she couldn't ignore. My pulse quickened at the thought. I pictured her discovering she couldn't just waltz in, smug grin fading. Realizing that someone finally set a boundary she couldn't bypass. But the plan wasn't without risk. Karen was well known in the neighborhood. Everyone feared her small, sharp control over HOA rules. If I made a move that was too obvious, it could backfire. She could complain, escalate, or even try to punish me for standing up to her. I had to be discreet, smart, and decisive. That evening, I drove to a local hardware store. My heart pounded as I walked the aisles, imagining all the ways I could regain control without confrontation. I didn't speak to anyone about my plan. Every glance over my shoulder made me feel like the stakes were higher than they actually were. But I couldn't ignore the thrill building inside me. For weeks, I'd felt cornered, powerless, and frustrated. Now, I was taking the first step toward turning that around. When I returned home, I sat in my car for a long moment, just staring at the garage. Karen's SUV was still there, and I realized something. She expected me to be passive. She thrived on that expectation. And that was the mistake she had made. My plan was already working in my mind. I just needed to execute it. I went inside, pacing, rehearsing exactly what I would do. I thought about changing the garage code, but then I worried she might notice before I could leave. I thought about locking her out physically, but I wanted it to be done in a way that wouldn't escalate into a scene. My mind raced, plotting every angle, anticipating every reaction. By the time night fell, I was exhausted. But my resolve had never been stronger. I checked the garage one last time before bed. Karen was inside, finishing up whatever she was doing. She glanced at me through the small window of her SUV, and I caught that same smug look, the one that had pushed me over the edge. I swallowed the lump in my throat and whispered to myself, "Not for long." The tension didn't leave me as I climbed into bed. Every creak of the house, every shadow on the driveway, made my pulse spike. I kept imagining the moment she would finally realize she no longer had the power she thought she did. It was intoxicating and terrifying at the same time. I knew the next steps would determine everything: my peace, my control, and my sanity. And then it hit me. The moment I'd been waiting for, the exact way to tip the scales without losing my composure, was already within reach. I felt a strange mix of fear and excitement as I drifted off to sleep, knowing that tomorrow the real game would begin. Karen thought she had one. She thought she could hum, tap her nails, and own my garage. But she had no idea what was coming. For the first time, I didn't feel powerless. For the first time, I felt like I was about to reclaim not just my garage, but my sense of control, my dignity, and my peace. And that thought alone kept me awake for hours, planning, imagining, and savoring the inevitable moment when Karen would realize she had gone too far. The morning. Sun barely touched the horizon when I made my move. I didn't rush. This wasn't about anger anymore. It was about control. Every step I took toward the garage was calculated, each heartbeat pounding in my chest like a drum warning of what was about to happen. Karen was already there, sipping her coffee in the driver's seat of my garage as if she'd lived there for years. Her smug smile flicked up as I approached, and for a moment I felt that old surge of fury. But I pushed it down. Patience was my weapon now. I fumbled with my keys, pretending to fumble. Karen raised an eyebrow, clearly expecting a confrontation. "Lost your keys?" She teased, that tone of voice designed to needle me. To make me feel small, I ignored her, slipping inside my house briefly to grab the garage control panel. My pulse raced. Today she would finally see the line she had crossed, and she wouldn't like it. I took a deep breath and pressed the buttons, one hand steady, the other trembling slightly. The garage door clicked in a way that felt almost ceremonial. The code had been changed. My private sanctuary was mine again. Karen shifted in her seat when she realized something was off. Her brow furrowed. "Wait, what did you do?" she asked, irritation threading through her voice. The confidence she had worn like armor yesterday was cracking. Ever so slightly, and it thrilled me. "You can't park here anymore," I said simply. My voice was calm, but each word carried a weight she hadn't felt before. "This is my space, my rules, my garage." She flinched, like the words physically struck her, and then, with that irritating habit of hers, she laughed, but it was tighter, strained. "Oh, come on. That's ridiculous. I'm just grabbing a few things. It's not like you're living here 24/7 or anything." Her words were desperate, but her composure was slipping. I realized then that she had never imagined someone would stand up to her so firmly, so quietly, without an argument. I felt a thrill of satisfaction, but it was fleeting. Karen wasn't just an annoyance. She was a force, and forces like her didn't back down easily. They escalated. I knew I had to be careful. I backed away slightly, keeping a safe distance. I could see the storm brewing in her eyes, the calculation she was already running in her head. She would try something. She always did. And this time I had to be ready. "What do you mean I can't park here?" she demanded, voice rising. "Do you think you can just change the rules because you're upset? That's not how the HOA works." "I didn't change the rules," I said. "I just enforced them in a way that matters." My words were calm, but the truth of them struck her harder than I could have imagined. For weeks, she had flaunted the rules, bending them for herself while everyone else followed them to the letter. And now, for the first time, she couldn't. Karen's face flushed red. "You're ridiculous. I'm going to report you." "The HOA will." I held up my hand, cutting her off. "Go ahead. I've already filed my complaint. But this isn't about the HOA anymore. This is about respect. Something you clearly don't understand." Her jaw tightened. I could see the gears turning, the denial mixing with frustration. And then something unexpected happened. Her phone rang. She glanced at it, hesitated, and muttered, I have to take this," leaving the engine running and the door unlocked. I stepped closer, heart racing. The opportunity was perfect. but I felt an odd twist in my chest, an edge of fear. What if she tried to climb out and confront me mid-call? What if she called someone to escalate immediately? Every scenario raced through my mind, but I pushed the fear down. I couldn't let her unpredictability paralyze me as she moved to answer the call. I quietly slipped past the SUV and grabbed the garage keypad. With a single press, I locked her out. Her eyes widened in shock, and her coffee nearly tipped as she slammed her hand on the door handle. What did you do? She stammered, panic rising in her voice now. The control she had always clung to, the invisible crown she wore in the neighborhood, was slipping. And I was holding the key. Literally. I told you, I said softly, almost teasingly. This is my space. My rules. My garage. You don't get to decide what belongs to me. Her face turned a dangerous shade of red. She tried the handle, jiggled the lock, and even banged on the door, but it wouldn't budge. Each failed attempt made her more frantic, more irrational. I stood a few steps away, watching her unravel. Realizing that this was more than just revenge, was a lesson she needed to learn. And then I noticed something else. The neighbors' blinds were twitching. Some were clearly watching. The tension wasn't just between Karen and me anymore. It had spilled into the quiet suburban street that prided itself on order. I felt a flash of unease. Karen was unpredictable, and now she was desperate. This could spiral. She could call the HOA, the police, anyone. And yet, she couldn't get in. Not today. Not while I had control. I backed away, giving her space, but keeping my presence felt. My pulse was wild, my hands slightly trembling from the adrenaline. This was personal now. This wasn't about rules or a garage anymore. It was about boundaries, power, and the audacity of someone thinking they could invade my life without consequence. Karen's voice cut through the tension like a knife. This isn't over. You'll regret this. I didn't respond. I just watched as she stormed out of the garage, phone pressed to her ear, muttering angrily. And for the first time, I felt a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. The game had begun, and there was no turning back. Tonight, I thought I would plan the next move. Because Karen wasn't just an annoyance, she was a storm. And I had just locked her out. The question now was, how far would she go to reclaim control? And how far would I go to keep it? The next morning, I woke with a mixture of excitement and dread. Karen hadn't slept in my garage, thankfully, but I knew she hadn't given up. My plan had worked, yes, but it had also pushed her into unpredictable territory. She was no longer smug. She was simmering, and when people simmer, they boil. I could feel it in the way the neighborhood seemed unusually quiet. As if everyone knew a storm was coming. I made my coffee and stared out the window at my driveway. The garage was empty. My car was parked safely inside. For a moment, I felt a rush of relief, like the battle had been won. But deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. Karen's fury was dangerous. And the thought of what she might do next made my stomach twist. Then, around mid-morning, it happened. I heard a loud banging at the front door. My heart leaped. Not a knock, not a polite tap banging, hard enough to shake the frame. I grabbed the nearest object for protection, though I knew it was more symbolic than useful. My pulse raced as I crept to the door, and there she was, Karen, storming into my yard. Face red, hair slightly tousled as if she hadn't bothered to fix it, eyes blazing. She looked like someone who had been scheming all night, plotting her next move, and now had decided she wasn't leaving until she got it. This is ridiculous. She shouted, voice carrying across the street. You can't just lock me out of my garage. I'm the HOA. You'll regret this. I stepped back, trying to keep my composure. This is my garage, I said evenly, though my hands were shaking. My rules. My space. You can't just invade it whenever you feel like it. Her face twisted in fury. Rules? You think rules matter? You're going to ruin your reputation over a parking spot. I opened my mouth to respond, but then she did something I hadn't expected. She reached into her bag, pulled out her phone, and started filming me. Everyone's going to see this, she yelled, waving the phone around. You're harassing me? I'm going to the HOA and the police, and everyone will know what a crazy neighbor you are." My blood ran cold. This was more serious than I'd imagined. Karen wasn't just angry, she was weaponizing the situation. I had underestimated how far she was willing to go to regain control. And suddenly, my careful plan felt fragile. I took a deep breath and stepped forward, trying to stay calm. "Go ahead," I said. "Film me. Call whoever you want. I'm not afraid of the truth." She hesitated for a split second, clearly startled by my confidence. But then she scoffed, muttering something about crazy people who think they own the world, and started walking toward the street. Still filming? I realized she might post this online, show it to the HOA, tell anyone who would listen. The stakes had just skyrocketed. As she turned the corner, a sudden thought struck me. She could also try to force her way back in. I ran to the garage and checked the lock, heart hammering. Everything was secure, but the thought of her coming back with a tow truck, a locksmith, or even someone else from the HOA made my pulse spike. I had crossed a line and there was no turning back. For hours, I paced inside the house, my mind racing. I thought about Karen's smug smile, her laughter, her complete disregard for my space. And then it hit me. This wasn't just about a garage anymore. This was about power, control, and the way someone could try to manipulate a situation to their advantage. I had taken a stand, but now I had painted a target on my back. By evening, the tension had escalated even further. I glanced outside and saw neighbors whispering, peeking through blinds, some shaking their heads. Word traveled fast in this quiet neighborhood, and Karen was determined to make sure everyone knew the story. I felt exposed, vulnerable, but also strangely empowered. I had drawn a line, and even if it made me the subject of gossip, I had done what no one else dared to do. Then, just when I thought the worst of it might settle, the unexpected happened. My neighbor across the street, someone I had barely spoken to, approached me cautiously. "Are you okay?" she asked, glancing at the driveway. "Karen has been calling people. She's saying some things about you." I felt a wave of anxiety wash over me. This was bigger than I thought. But I also felt a strange thrill. I had started something, and now it was out of my hands. The situation had grown far more serious, personal, and unpredictable than I had imagined. Karen wasn't just an annoying neighbor anymore. She was a threat to my peace, my reputation, and maybe even my sense of safety. That night, I sat in the dark, staring at the garage door, realizing that everything had changed. Karen's anger had reached a boiling point, and my careful plan had pushed her into territory I hadn't anticipated. I knew one thing for certain. Tomorrow, I couldn't just react. I had to act. And that was terrifying and exhilarating because for the first time, the stakes weren't just about a parking spot. They were about respect, control, showing Karen that no one, absolutely no one, crossed me without consequences. Tomorrow would decide everything. The next morning, I woke with a mixture of fear and determination that left me dizzy. Last night's events had pushed the situation to the breaking point. Karen wasn't just angry anymore, she was relentless. She had made threats, spread rumors, and humiliated me in front of neighbors. And I knew she wouldn't stop until she got her way. But something inside me had shifted. I was no longer willing to let her invade my space, my peace, or my life. Today, I had to finish this once and for all. I walked to the garage, heart hammering in my chest. My hands were clammy, my pulse racing like a drumbeat, echoing in my ears. Karen's SUV wasn't there. That was Gudot, leased for now, but the tension in the air was thick, like the calm before a storm. I double-checked the lock I had installed, pressing the buttons one last time. Everything was secure. My sanctuary was mine again, but I knew she could strike at any moment. She was unpredictable, and unpredictability made her dangerous. I decided to act before she could regain momentum. I drafted a message to the HOA, documenting everything she had done, her unauthorized use of my garage, the threats, the filming, the harassment. I attached timestamps, photos, and even a short video clip I had recorded of her banging on the door. This time there would be no ignoring it. No casual, we'll look into it. This was the undeniable truth, and it was my armor. But as I hit send, my phone rang. I froze. It was Karen. My stomach dropped. I debated whether to answer, but my resolve won out. I pressed the speakerphone button, keeping my distance. "This isn't over," she spat, her voice trembling with rage. "You think you can humiliate me and get away with it? I'll ruin you. Everyone will know how. How crazy you are." I took a deep breath. "Go ahead. Everyone will know the truth too. You've crossed the line, and this time there's no turning back." Her shrieked laugh made me flinch. "You'll regret this," she yelled before hanging up abruptly. I stared at the phone, feeling my hand shake. Fear and adrenaline warred inside me, but underneath it all, a strange sense of calm began to settle. I had taken a stand, and no matter what she did next, I'd done the right thing. Hours later, she returned, more calculated this time. I was inside, watching through the window as she circled the driveway, inspecting the locks, shaking her head in disbelief. My chest tightened as I realized she might call a tow truck, a locksmith, anyone to force her way back in. But I didn't panic. I stayed calm, reminding myself that this was the moment I had been preparing for. Then it happened. She knocks not politely this time, but aggressively, pounding on the door until my ears rang. I felt a surge of anger and fear all at once. This was the moment when everything could explode. My neighbors were watching now, their curtains drawn back, their eyes wide. The pressure, the tension, the stakes, they were all on me. And I refused to let her intimidate me. I walked to the door, opened it slightly, and looked her in the eyes. "Karen, stop," I said firmly. "This is my garage, my property. You have no right to be here. I've given you every opportunity to leave peacefully. Now you have no excuse." Her face contorted in fury. "Excuse? You think this is about excuses? You're going to pay for this?" Before I could react, she lunged forward, gesturing wildly. I stepped back, my heart racing, realizing that words alone weren't going to stop her. That's when I made the decision I had been preparing for, the one that would finally turn the tables. I pressed the garage code one final time, locking her out completely. Her hands pounded on the door, her voice rising to a shriek, and for a moment, I felt the full weight of our conflict. Then she froze. Her eyes darted around, realizing that no one could help her. That the power she had always wielded over others was useless against me. And in that moment, I saw the tiniest flicker of defeat buried under layers of rage and humiliation. It was fleeting, but it was there. I stepped back, breathing heavily, feeling both relief and exhaustion wash over me. The adrenaline still coursed through my veins, leaving me trembling, but I knew I had won, at least for now. The aftermath was immediate. Neighbors whispered, some glaring at Karen, others at me. I felt a mix of satisfaction and unease. Karen wouldn't let this go quietly. She never did, but for the first time. She had met resistance she couldn't push aside, and that felt powerful. Later that night, I sat in my garage, staring at my car, feeling a strange calm. The door was locked, the space was mine, and for the first time in weeks, I could breathe. But I also knew the consequences were just beginning. Karen's wrath would ripple through the neighborhood. The HOA might investigate. Gossip would spread. But I had drawn a line, and for once, I had enforced it. As I sank into the driver's seat, exhausted but triumphant, I realized something else. This wasn't just about a garage. It was about boundaries, respect, and the courage to stand up for myself even when it felt terrifying. And as much as I feared what might come next, I also felt a new sense of control. I had faced the storm, and I hadn't faltered for the first time. I understood something vital. Sometimes protecting your peace means taking risks, facing fear head-on and refusing to back down, no matter who is trying to bully you. And Karen. Well, she would learn that the hard way. The days after Karen's meltdown were tense, but strangely peaceful. She hadn't returned to my garage, at least not directly. And the neighborhood seemed to hold its breath. waiting to see what would happen next. I stayed vigilant, checking the locks, monitoring the driveway, and keeping my phone close. But each time I looked at my garage, I felt a sense of quiet triumph. The battle had been won, and for the first time in weeks, I could breathe. The HOA finally responded a few days later. They requested a meeting, of course, and Karen had already started spinning her story, painting herself as the victim. But I had evidence photos, timestamps, recordings, and I presented them calmly, without anger, without exaggeration. The room went quiet. Even the chairwoman of the HOA had to acknowledge the truth. Karen had violated my property rights, and I had handled it responsibly. After that meeting, the tension in the neighborhood began to shift. Whispers circulated. Eyes that had once watched me skeptically now seemed to hold a quiet respect. Karen, of course, was furious, but her power had weakened. People saw her arrogance, her disregard for boundaries, and they began to question her authority. And me, I felt a strange sense of peace, tinged with pride. I had stood up for myself, and it hadn't destroyed my had strengthened me. Walking past my garage that evening, I noticed something I hadn't before: the flowers in my yard, blooming brighter than usual, as if celebrating a small victory alongside me. My garage, once a source of anxiety and stress, now felt like a fortress, a place where I could feel safe and in control. The fear that had gripped me weeks ago was gone, replaced by a calm determination that I hadn't realized I possessed. Karen did return eventually. Of course, lurking near the street, muttering complaints, filming little videos to post online. But I didn't react. I had learned something essential. I didn't need to control her. I didn't need to fight every battle, and I didn't need to let her dictate my peace. I simply maintained my boundaries, secure in the knowledge that I had done the hard part, stood firm, refused to be intimidated, and reclaimed what was mine. Over the next week, life began to feel normal again. My routines returned, my neighbors greeted me without tension, and I could park my car in my garage without the gnawing anxiety that had plagued me for weeks. And yet, I couldn't help but reflect on how close I had come to letting fear and frustration dictate my actions. I had almost let anger control me, almost let Karen's arrogance steal my peace. But in the end, I had chosen strategy over reaction.com over chaos. And the results were profound. One evening, as I sat in my garage, sipping a cup of tea and listening to the faint hum of the neighborhood settling into night, I realized how much I had grown. This wasn't just a story about a parking spot or a garage. It was about boundaries, courage, and self-respect. I had discovered a strength I didn't know I had, a voice that refused to be silenced, and a patience that allowed me to act decisively when it mattered most. And Karen? She remained a presence in the neighborhood, yes, but she was no longer the untouchable figure she had once been. People saw her for what she was: a bully, an enforcer of rules she ignored herself, someone whose power relied on others' fear. That realization was enough to diminish her control. And for me, it was liberating. In the quiet of my garage, I reflected on the lessons I had learned. Respect is earned, not given. Boundaries are essential, and enforcing them is not rude or selfish, it's necessary. Fear and frustration can be transformed into strategy and action, but only if you remain calm, deliberate, and true to yourself. I had faced someone who tried to take what was mine, and I had won not through aggression, but through courage, patience, and resolve. As the sun set behind the houses, casting long shadows across my driveway, I smiled to myself. My garage was just a space for my car. Yes, but it had become so much more. It was a symbol of resilience, of standing up when it matters most, of reclaiming control over your life. And for the first time in a long while, I felt completely at peace. I knew that conflicts would arise in life, that people would test my patience and my boundaries again. But now I carried a quiet confidence that I could handle them. I had faced fear, confrontation, and arrogance head-on, emerged stronger, wiser, and more grounded. That night, as I closed the garage door and leaned against it, I whispered to myself, almost like a promise, I will never let anyone take what is mine: my peace, my space, my life. Not now. Not ever. And in that moment, I understood something simple, but profound. Standing up for yourself doesn't have to be loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's strategic. And sometimes it changes everything.